Sipoc, supplier, input, process, output and customer, is a tool to identify various players and related information in Six Sigma. Sipoc utilizes the process steps, inputs to the process steps and their sources. On the other side, Sipoc identifies process outputs and their destination for better understanding customer input, interface and interests. Sipoc is a simple acronym. The Sipoc diagram is the tool that holds the real power to convey meaning and understanding. A Sipoc diagram is a communication tool. It visually documents a process and is a high-level process map showing the major steps of a process. The detailed steps come later, in the measure phase. If you are using DMAIC, it provides a fact-based process description as a basis for understanding current state. It is a simple diagram for identifying the basic elements of a process: boundaries, suppliers, inputs, process steps, outputs, and customers. Be very clear about where the process starts and where the process ends. This should align with and help define your project scope. Sipoc can be used to define the scope and boundaries of your project. It helps communicate inside and outside an organization. If a project scope has already been defined, Sipoc can validate the accuracy of the scope. If you are following the DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, problem-solving methodology, Sipoc is introduced in the define phase of the project. Involve a cross-section of those who work with the process to create this diagram. No single person will have all the process knowledge you need. Remember, it is a high-level view of the as-is state of a process under investigation. Typically, a simple data collection template is used that helps facilitate the gathering of the relevant information: suppliers, inputs, processes, outputs and customers about a process. You may want to use it prior to constructing the actual process like flowcharts, but the value is in visually presenting and organizing the analysis data. To construct, begin with a high-level process map, usually consisting of 4 to 5 steps. Then list outputs of the process, followed by the customers who receive the outputs. Then turn your attention to the front end of the Sipoc, with a listing of the inputs to the process and their suppliers. Reminder: be very clear about where the process starts and where the process ends. This should align with and help define your project scope. Keep the process map to the highest level. Don't be tempted to dive too deeply into process steps at this point. Keep it to 4 to 5 steps. The process you choose for your project may be a subset of a larger process or a standalone process. Start by brainstorming with the team about outputs. Outputs can also include requirements. For example, each product produced may have a tolerance level to meet quality requirements. If you have a lot of outputs, focus on the critical few. List the outputs on the diagram. Thus, for each process step, identify and document the outputs under the outputs column. These are the tangible things that the process produces. Getting started the right way is critical. Properly identifying suppliers and customers is necessary. Using Sipoc can help identify the players. Next, identify those people or processes that receive the output. Take special note of any downstream processes. Do the outputs of this process match the inputs of the downstream process, and identify the customers. Now we turn our attention to the process inputs. Inputs can also include requirements. For example, raw materials may have a purity level to meet quality requirements. If you have a lot of inputs, focus on the critical few. The inputs are called as X's and the outputs are referred as Y's. The process can be imagined as a transformation function f of input variables x. Finally, identify the people, systems, or upstream processes that supply the inputs. Take special note of any upstream process. Do the inputs of this process match the outputs of the upstream process? List the suppliers on the diagram. Thus the Sipoc is often presented at the outset of process improvement efforts such as Kaizen events or during the define phase of the make process. It has three typical uses depending on the audience: to give people who are unfamiliar with a process a high-level overview, to reacquaint people whose familiarity with a process has faded or become out of date due to process changes, to help people in defining a new process. Consider a case of mowing the lawn which involves prepare lawn for mowing, mow lawn, trim lawn and cleanup and removal. Remember, be very clear about where the process starts and where the process ends. This should align with and help define your project scope. Keep the process map to the highest level. When creating a Sipoc diagram, a project team does not necessarily begin at the supplier. The team should more likely start in the middle and ask questions about the process itself. The team may label the process with the summaries of the most critical 3 to 6 steps. Next is documenting what is delivered to whom, output and customer. The team can brainstorm and prioritize the most critical 1 to 3 customers and identify, prioritize and align the outputs most significant to those customers. Later the team can verify these initial assumptions with voice of the customer tools from the make process and designate as critical to quality, speed or cost. Finally, the team can identify what input or information is needed to perform that process that is the inputs and who provides that input, the supplier. The Sipoc diagram should describe the existing process and not the to-be process. It should be prepared by a subject matter expert who know the process, and review the Sipoc diagram for accuracy and completeness. Ensure that you include sub-processes and other key system interfaces within the Sipoc diagram. At input, process and output stage a set of metrics is developed which are grouped as critical to quality, speed and cost. Since the output column usually shows multiple Ys, VOC is again needed to determine which Y should be included in the project. In the input column, the Sipoc provides a list of potential X's. This means it shows how achieving the project Y contributes to higher-level business objectives like financial targets, customer satisfaction or strategically relevant goals on time to market, on-time delivery, inventory level,